Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshops, where we get together in the middle of the week to learn more about technology. This is the third Thursday of the month, and we are having another one of our Learning Linux workshops. Today we have a very unique presentation presenting or coming to us from Canada today. Alan German is going to be talking with us. We've heard a lot about chat boxes and AI and all of that sort of stuff. And Alan came to me and said, I've got a presentation that I have a way that you can create your own AI chat box on your own computer. So I'm going to turn things over to Alan and let us know about how to create our own chat box. So Alan, if you are there, ready to take over. And don't, there we go, okay.
Okay, so we should be all set with my presentation on the slideshow there.
Perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much, John. And it's actually not really my way of doing it, but I will tell you a little bit about about small language models and how to run one locally, which I found out from basically internet sources. So we'll come to that shortly. But I think everybody's probably used artificial intelligence, and you're probably very familiar with something like ChatGPT, which is one of the large language models. And you know, if you play something like Trivial Pursuit, you've probably asked it, you know, what is the capital of Uzbekistan? And ChatGPT will instantly come back to you and tell you, well, the capital is Tashkent, of course. And one of the nice things about chatbots is that you can ask it a question, and then if you don't quite understand what's going on, you can ask it a follow-up question, and you're going to get this dialogue going where you can actually talk to the chatbot. So, for example, maybe you know, we'd like to know, well, where is Uzbekistan? And ChatGPT will tell you in words, essentially, that it's close to Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, and it's quite close to all kinds of stands. And one of the stands you might recognize there is Afghanistan, so that probably gives you a clue where it is. But if you're geographically challenged like me, you probably want to go and look at something like Google Maps. And the way I think about the stands is that if you think about the Indian subcontinent, then you probably know that Pakistan is basically to the north and a bit west. And north of Pakistan is a whole bunch of stands. And you may be able to see there, the highlighted area in the center is Uzbekistan. And one of the other interesting things I found out from one of the other chatbots was that Uzbekistan is actually a double landlocked country. It's actually surrounded by other countries which are landlocked. So you have to go through two countries before you can get to an ocean, I guess. Anyway, you know, from our perspective, we're probably more interested in computer-related things. So let's pretend that we need to edit PDF files, and we'd like something which is free, and in particular, we'd probably like something which is open source. So here I'm going to Perplexity .ai, and I'm asking it, well, what open source PDF editors are available? And it gives me a whole bunch of things here, which you may recognize some of these, PDF-SAM and LibreOffice Draw. And if we ask another question, a follow-up question again, well, which one of these is best? And it says, well, it depends actually what you want to do in terms of editing your files. And you know, LibreOffice Draw is good for editing and adding images and stuff, and other things do other things. And right at the bottom of this page is a summary of its recommendations. And it says, you know, if you want to just do simple editing, then LibreOffice Draw is okay. Annotation, Ocular works really well. And it does, by the way. And if you want to merge PDF files, for example, PDF SAM is a great tool for doing that, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's actually pretty useful. And okay, this time of year, we're going to a party, and it's a potluck deal. So problem is there are vegetarians and vegans there. So I ask it, well, can you give me a recipe for some appetizers that would be suitable for these people with dietary restrictions? Or alternatively, I might say, are there any outstanding recalls on the 2024 CRV? And it turns out there are a couple. And one of the nice things about Perplexity is that in addition to giving you the answer, you notice that the individual pieces of the answer have references. So, for example, these two recalls are reference number 3, which is a website called Cars. So it gives you the opportunity here to look at the answers and decide whether the source of that information is reputable and believable. Because you probably know that these large language models, sometimes if they don't know the answer, they'll make it up. And that process is called hallucination. Well, if it's hallucinating, then at least you can go and check the reference and see if that is anything like reasonable. One of the things I use chatbots for is more along the lines of writing code, debugging code, finding out what errors mean, explaining how some of these complex code things are generated. And so again, I would ask it questions. For example, here, I'm working on an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm playing around with address files from Thunderbird, and I want to combine these files. But what I want to do is, in my code, I want to find out whether the files that I'm looking for actually exist on the drive before I do anything. And I don't know the code for that offhand. So I'm asking the chatbot here, what would the VBA code, the Visual Basic for Applications, the macro code, how would I test if a file exists? And it tells me, well, you want to use this dir file path command and see if that's true or false. Essentially, if there's content in that command or not, and then you can say yes, the file exists, or no, the file doesn't. And by the same token, I might be writing a Python script, and I've got a long string of characters, and they're not going to fit on a line. So I need a continuation character. So I can just ask the chatbot, well, what character does Python use in order to continue a line of code onto another line? And it tells me that, well, what you want to use is the backslash. And then it goes into a whole bunch of stuff, which I don't really care about. The backslash works just fine to do the continuation characters. So that's kind of how you can ask it to do bits and pieces of code. When you have some code, you may write a program here. This one is, I'm doing some work with vehicle VINs, vehicle identification numbers, from a crash recorder file. And I'm getting the VIN, I'm getting the file name, and I'm getting the collision events from this crash recorder. And I want to write them out onto a single line. So I've written my code here, and you can see this is actually in a integrated development environment. So the blue box is essentially a code editor. And then I've pressed one of the icons to actually run this code. And the bottom box is the output from my program. And my program has crashed. And it's telling me that I have a syntax error because it's looking for a colon somewhere. It actually tells me exactly where the colon is. But let's suppose I had a much more complicated error message. What I would do is take that error message and drop it into a chatbot and say, Python gave me this error, can you explain it, or kind of thing, and you give it the code and the error, and it will come back and it tells you exactly what's going on here. The error occurs because of a missing colon, and it's at the end, it's in this with statement, and so on and so forth. And here's the corrected code. So it tells you exactly how to change your code. And you probably notice right here that it's in the highlighted, in the red box there, that we have the colon has been added. They've actually put a comment in that box to tell us that. And in the explanation for changes, you can see that it gave us the original line where it was missing, and then it's added in the colon. So it's created the corrected code. And the interesting thing is that it's actually doing some code optimization here. We didn't ask it to do that, but it's actually decided that to tell us that you have a file close statement at the end of this thing, which you actually don't need, because the way Python works, the file will be closed at the end of the block of code where it's being used. So the fclose command, f.close command, is actually redundant. So there you have a case where you're getting error reporting, error correction essentially, and program optimization at the same time, which is quite amazing. Anyway, one of the problems people talk about with large language models is the resources that are necessary to run these things. And you've got multiple servers across the world, all running 24/7 and consuming enormous amounts of energy to do this stuff. So maybe there's going to be one of these days a simpler way. So here's kind of my thoughts on that. There's lots of artificial intelligence chatbots out there, and quite a few of them are free, while some of them require a paid subscription. So the question in my mind is, well, how long are these free ones going to remain free? So that's one concern, one issue. The other thing is, as we've just seen, these bots know everything. They can tell you about geography and recipes and car recalls and code and all kinds of stuff. But supposing you don't need that, supposing you're like me and all you really need right now is a chatbot that knows how to program in Python, and that's all you need. And so how about trying to find a small bot that only knows about Python, and more particularly, a chatbot that will run on my local computer, so I don't have to engage in these incredible resource intensive web servers all over the place. Well, of course, to find out, we're going to have to ask a chatbot. So we're going to have to use a few resources. So let's ask, this is Perplexity again, what large language models are open source and specific to programming, in particular in Python, and will run on a PC. And it's giving us a bunch of answers here, a bunch of different models. And one of the ones that caught my eye was this guy here called Llama. And you notice that Llama is a tool to run large language models locally. So that's one of the things we want. And it also tells us that there's a subset called CodeLlama. And in fact, there is a Python specialized version of CodeLlama, which is available for us to run on our local PC. So let's take a look at CodeLlama. Well, it turns out that CodeLlama, and CodeLlama, by the way, is developed by the Meta Corporation, but it's a free and a freely available system. So you just download it and install it. So the CodeLlama actually supports a bunch of programming languages. So if you're interested in Python, then it's covered. If you want to know about C++ or Bash, then it will do all of those things. But there is this specialized version, CodeLlama : Python, which it says is fine-tuned on 100 billion tokens of Python code. So that is going to be pretty specific, I would think, and hopefully it's going to work fairly well. So what do we really need to do? Well, what we really need to do is go to the Llama website, which is llama.com. And you will notice there that it says we can get up and running with large language models, and there is a download button. And if we hit that download button and we choose the Linux option, then it tells us the Linux command that we can use to install Llama on our Linux-based PC. So we use a curl command, and all we need to do is basically cut and paste that command from the web page here into a Linux terminal. So here is our Linux terminal, and we've pasted in the command. So we can now just hit return, and the installation it asks for a password, of course, because we've given it, we're trying to change the operating system here. So, and it wants a password to run. And then it goes into a set of progress bars where the little number sign there are running across the screen and telling us how far it's got with various portions of the installation process. And eventually it will give us some text, and it will finally say that the installation is complete and we should run the command Llama from the command line from the terminal in order to get started. So we could follow the bouncing ball and do exactly what it says. But if you want to know more about the whole process, then one of the things you can do is go to GitHub and find a manual for Llama. And this is drilling down through the tutorials into the Linux segment of this document. And you see there it tells you how to install it, and then there's a whole raft of other stuff about how to use Llama on a Linux system. So you'll recall that we were interested in this Code Llama subset of the large language model, and in particular, we want the Python version of Code Llama. So let's go back to our Llama website, and let's go and look at the various models that are available. We've installed the main software now, and now what we need to do is get a language model to run on that software platform. And so if we look at models, and we're looking at the main Llama 3.1 model, but you'll notice that there's also a search bar there. We can basically try and look something up. And remember, what we're interested in looking up is Code Llama. And here is, we're searching for Code Llama, and there it is. And when we open that web page, you see that we have 7B and 13B and so forth. These are the different sizes of large language models which are available. In terms of 7B means that this is a 7 billion parameter model. Clearly, a 7 billion parameter model is going to be smaller than a 34 billion model, a 34 billion parameter model. And since we're running on a PC, it's quite likely that what we really want to do is run the smallest model, at least to start with, and see whether that's actually going to work for us or not. But we can still drill down a little bit more. If we go to the 7B drop-down menu here and open that, then we have the option to view more models under this Code Llama subset. And what I want to do there is scroll down, and I want to find Python. And you will notice that when I highlight Python there, I get this code box here, which tells me this is the command to install Code Llama Python in your model. So we're going to go back to the terminal now. We're going to cut and paste this command from the web page and paste it into the Linux terminal. So here we are. We're telling Llama, which we've already installed, to run the Python, I keep calling it large language model, but it's really a small language model. But we want to run the Python model. So again, the white box there is all the progress bar things I've completed. And at the bottom here, it says success. So we've actually, we've installed a Llama, and now we have Python available to actually run and do things for us. So the question is, what should we do? Well, one of the things I often do in chatbots is I ask it, write the program for me. And sometimes if you have a really complicated program that you're trying to generate, it's pretty hard to give an all-encompassing description to a chatbot. So maybe what you do is you give it a segment of code, like a coding module, give it the basis for that module that you want to generate, let it generate some code, and then give it a second module, generate some more code, and then you add those two things together inside your program editor, your IDE development environment. For our purposes, we're just going to generate a pretty simple task. So we're going to ask our model on our PC, we're going to ask it to write a Python program which will compare two text files. One is called fox1.txt and the other is fox2.txt. And what we want to do is have the code, have the program compare the lines in those two files and, as it says, output any lines that are different. So that's the instruction that we're going to give our chatbot. And here you can see that I have actually typed that in. I've said Llama run code Llama Python, and then here's the instruction, write the Python program to compare the files. So and again, we hit return, and that will start that command running. And what it tells you is that it's going to generate a function which compares two file names, and it's going to write the differences to a file called differentlines.txt. And that's fine. That's basically what we're asking it to do. And so you can see it started to write some code here. It started with a function definition, and it's given the function name, compare, and the parameters which are going to be used to be passed to that function, the two file names. And it will carry on doing that until it's completed. And now you can see that it has actually generated the Python code in response to our query. So let's go and grab that and cut and paste it into a Python script. So here we are in a text editor. We're going to call this file diff_fox.py. So it's a Python script file. And then we're going to basically run that Python script and see what we get. But first of all, what we need to do is find out what are we working with. And here are the two files, the two fox files. The first one says that the fox jumped over the lazy dog. And the second one says that it jumped over the extremely lazy dog. So clearly there is at least one of those lines in those two files which is different between the files. So now we can go back to our terminal and we can run Python. We use the command Python 3 for the installed version that I have. I say Python 3, and then I give it the Python script name difffox.py, and that will generate things because here is my home folder. And you can see in my home folder, I've got fox1.txt here, fox2.txt here, And when I run that Python script, it generates this file called differentlines.txt, which, if you recall, that's what the Python script actually did. So let's open up differences.txt and see what we've got. And what we've got is jumped over the lazy dog. And that might be surprising or not. I don't know. I was actually surprised that that's what I got. I wasn't really expecting that. But when you think about it, I did give it a very simplistic description of the program that I wanted to do. And I just asked it to output any lines that were different. And there's one line that's different, and it's outputted it for me. And if you look at the file here, this Python script, you probably see that there are two different bits to it, if you like. It started off by writing the function definition. So this red box here contains the actual function. And the main program is basically just one line. It just calls the function, gives it the two file names, fox1 and fox2.txt, and then the function actually generates the answer. So what it does is well, let's find out what it does. I don't know what this thing does. I mean, do you know how to write Python code? Well, I actually do a little bit, but one of the things you can do is you can just go to a chatbot and say, well, here's my code, and let's go to a chatbot and just say, well, what does this thing do? I mean, sometimes it might be much more complicated than this. And in fact, there's actually an interesting thing here. It sets up the output file, and it creates this file called differentlines.txt, but it uses this attribute W plus. Now, W makes sense. That says write stuff. It's going to be a write file, write to this file. But what does the plus do? That was actually a surprise to me. So let's ask the chatbot to tell us what's going on. We take the code, we fire it into a chatbot, and it basically describes what's going on for us. So it opens the first file for reading, right? So it opens file name 1. Remember, this is a function, so it's using the parameter file name 1, opening it as a read-only file. Does the same thing for the second file, opens that as a read file. And then it opens the differentlines.txt for writing. That's the W attribute. But notice here that W plus allows both reading and writing, but it truncates the file if it already exists. And so that's kind of the wrinkle, I guess, with W plus. And then it tells us it's going to use a for loop to go through each line in the first file. So it does a for any line in file 1, and then if that line is not in file 2, then output the line. Right? So that's how the program is basically working. It opens the two files. It starts reading line by line through file 1. And if it finds the line in file 1, it goes and checks, is this line in file 2? If that line isn't in file 2, then it writes the line to the output. So again, a very simplistic way of doing it, but it did what we told it to. So it actually works quite well. So that's using a small language model on a local PC with a very simplistic program, very simplistic task. What would happen if we gave exactly the same task to a large language model, such as ChatGPT? So here we're in ChatGPT, and we've given it the same task. We've told it to write a Python program to compare the two files. And here's the answer. So here's the Python script, and looks at them line by line and outputs any lines that are different. And you may see here that it's giving us quite a bit more code. So it's giving us a more detailed, a more involved, a more intricate way of looking at these two files. And again, because the large language model, at the end of the description, the end of the answer, it actually tells us how the script works. So it says, it opens both files and it reads them into lists. So it's essentially creating an array of the lines in each file for each of the two files. So we're getting two arrays of lines. One's called lines 1, one's called lines 2. Then it goes and looks for differences. So it's checking each line in both files. And if there are differences, then it's going to print a line number this time, along with the differing lines. And you notice now it's doing it from both files. Even though I didn't ask it to, it's a much more intelligent way of showing you the differences in two text files. And so it's going to show us the differences in two text files. And it's even more sophisticated than that, because it's also looking to see if there are more lines in one file than there are in the other. So it's going to account for, if I've got one longer file, it's going to account for that when it looks at both files. And then it tells me to, fix the file names if I've not got the right ones, and make sure I've got the right file paths and so forth. So here you can see the code that ChatGPT has generated. And so it starts off by, again, creating this function. This time it's called compare files. It has two parameters, file 1 and file 2. And then again, it opens the two files as read only. So open file 1, read, open file 2, read, as these parameters F1 and F2. And then here's where it creates the array. Lines 1 becomes a file 1 read line. So read all of the lines from file 1 and dump them into this array called lines 1. And then down the bottom here, it's now got both the arrays. So it's trying to find out which is the longest file, which one has the most lines. So it's looking for the maximum number of lines between these two arrays. And then it's going to loop through the number of lines. So it's doing an I in the range, starting at the beginning to the maximum number of lines. And it's doing some stuff. It's stripping out white space. So if you've got blank characters here and there, it's going to, at the front and the back, I think, it strips out the characters. It strips out the blank characters spaces at the beginning and end of the line. So you don't want it to do that. You'd have to change the code. And then once it's done that, then it's doing that straight comparison. If the line from file 1 isn't equal to the line in file 2, then print a bunch of stuff. So tell me that there's a difference at line number something or other, and then it prints out the line from file 1 and the line from file 2. So you have a really good idea now of what the differences are in your two text files. Now, again, we've got a pretty simple set of text files. So this is the actual output. You can see that we have a difference at line 2. And in file 1, we had that sentence or the phrase jumped over the lazy dog. And in file 2, we have jumped over the extremely lazy dog. So the large language model, ChatGPT, clearly gives us a much better way of displaying the differences between these two simple text files. And clearly, in our small language model using a Llama, we'd have to do some follow-up work and say, well, that program you gave me was very nice, but what I really need to do is I need to see the line in each file printed out. Now, can you do that for me and see what code you get? And you have to go through this iterative process whereby you keep asking questions, keep asking it to do different things until you get to a situation where you either have the final code that will run for you, or you have enough code that you can make modifications manually so that it does what you want it to do. So the large language models are still much more efficient, much easier to work with, I think, than the small language model, but clearly there's some potential here. Now, one of the places I got this information from was this website called Dave's Garage. This is a YouTube channel, and Dave is Dave Plummer. Dave Plummer is a retired Microsoft software engineer. He worked on things like Windows 95 way back when. And it's a very interesting website if you're interested in Windows. There's a lot of kind of background information from the good old days and how things work. But he's also pretty well up to date in a lot of things. And clearly he's talking about artificial intelligence solutions and how to run your own on a local computer. One of the really interesting things about this video is that he borrowed a computer from Dell, and this video, I think it's this particular video, he has a whole raft of different machines that he runs this local language model on, and some of them run much better than others. When he ends up with this machine right here. This is the machine he borrowed from Dell. It has an AMD Threadripper CPU, 96 cores, which costs $10,000. The workstation has 512 gigabytes of RAM, and it has dual NVIDIA GPUs with 96 gigabytes of onboard video memory. And the pair of those video cards costs $30,000. So this Threadripper workstation, it runs Llama really well. But the downside is the cost is about $50,000. My conclusions from this whole process, in my house, the super user, the SU, is actually the spousal unit. So my note to my SU is, I really need a bigger and much faster computer. And that $50,000 one would be really nice, but I don't think that's going to happen, not even in my Christmas stocking. However, seriously, Llama, it's really easy to install. You have a Linux computer, you basically paste in that command into the terminal and Llama will install. You will find there's lots of how-to tutorials and videos on how to use Llama, and so that's not a problem. There's lots of documentation available. If you run a true large language model, I started off by running the 7 gigabyte Llama 3 model, and I found it was really slow. When I asked it to generate the code, it was like watching a teletype in slow motion. The characters were kind of, bump, 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 bump along on the screen rather than just lines of code showing up instantly. And so the really large language models are pretty slow. And even the small ones may not be ready for prime time, but the Python specific version, this Llama Python small language model actually works quite well. It does produce useful code. I haven't played around with it an awful lot, but it will produce, kind of modules of code quite efficiently. And as I say, you can generally create pieces of your code as kind of program modules. How do I open files? How do I read lines into arrays? How do I compare those arrays? You could do it in kind of stages. If it's too difficult to write one set of instructions to the chatbot to generate the whole program, then tell it just to write one small module and then manually combine those modules together later on. But the bottom line is it worth pursuing large language models on APC at this point? And Personally, it's not, because my computer isn't big enough and fast enough to run a true large language model. But I think this is the way of the future. I can see that these things are going to become more sophisticated. Hardware is going to get bigger, faster, cheaper. Large language models are going to probably be ported down into these small language models, which are very specific to certain tasks. And it'll probably be very efficient, an efficient way to do certain things with artificial intelligence. So I think it's worthwhile taking a look at this stuff, and certainly keep your eye on the ball for the future, because this may very well be the way of the world. And that's it for my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions.
That was good. Judy, I think, has got something for you.
Yep. How about if we change back to our normal view? Nope. Now's your time to ask some questions. Can you define the difference between large and small language models?
Not precisely, but a small language model has a lot less parameters than a large language model. Basically, if you think about it, you can't ask the Python coding manual, the Python code module, you can't ask it what's the capital of Timbuktu, not Timbuktu. You can't ask it what's the capital of Nepal, because it won't know. That's not a line of Python code. And so the large language models, they truly do know pretty much everything up until the date at which they cut off when they were trained on their data. The small language models are much more focused. They only know about the specific thing that they've been trained on, and that will be very well defined in general.
Which is Gemini?
Gemini is a large language model. It's the, is it the Google one? No, Google's Bard, I think.
No, it's Bard changed to Gemini.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So it's a large language model from Google.
Okay. How about ChatGPT? Been back in the day when we first started talking about this, Bill asked a question for me that said, how many people do not back up? Right now, and ChatGPT came back, and the first answer of all the rest of the answers were correct, except that one said, "I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I have nothing current, so to speak." So when ChatGPT started out, were they a small language model and then changed into a large language when they were better trained to have more up-to-date information?
Not really. The large language models are trained on data, and typically the early ones at least had a cutoff date. So it was trained up to September 2021. And then if you asked it a question, well, who's the Prime Minister of Canada in 2022? It would say, "I'm sorry, I don't have that information. My training only went up to, September 2021. But nowadays, I think they still have cutoff dates. I don't think it will. It may very well tell you that it doesn't have that information because its database isn't current enough.
Yeah, my assumption would be Gemini would be the most up to date because it gets all the Google stuff instantly. But they are polite, as you say. They say, "I'm sorry."
Oh, they're incredibly polite. If you ask it to write some Python code, and the Python code crashes when you run it, and you give it the error message, and you say, "Oh, your code crashed at this point," it will say, "Oh, I'm really sorry about that. I failed to see this, that, and the other, and I really need to do this. Here's the corrected code."
I think that's so cool. Truly, I suggest that everybody try ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot and see which one you like, because they all have their differences in their answers back to you. In Gemini, I find it will use words that we wouldn't, like when doing a bio, And we wouldn't say that about ourselves, but they take it just to a different level that makes total sense, but isn't a big patting ourselves on the back like crazy.
I would suggest try Perplexity too.
Okay, that's right. I haven't put that into my repertoire. I often do all three. I'll start with one. I'll put the results I got there into the next one, those results into the third one, and see which one I like best, and go with, my gut. Murray, you have a question. Unmute yourself, kiddo.
I gave him permission to.
Oh, yeah, okay. Now I can. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say I've been doing some getting Copilot to write some bash scripts for me. And as you say, they get it wrong, and then you give them a refinement and they say, "Oh yeah, that's right." And here's the revised code. And the trouble is, after it's so as if you were talking to a real technical expert, that you forget that it's really dumb and it doesn't really understand what it's doing. And you find that after a while, you might be going around in circles. You say, "Hey, 5 iterations ago, that's the one you gave me. We're back there." And so you have to go and look at the code and fix it yourself sometimes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've come across that problem.
It's so easy to forget that it is not really a techie expert. And it comes up with some things you got to be really careful you don't wreck something with it. But anyway, thank you for the great presentation. And one of the things I want to do, I think Perplexity is the one, but I will have to use a paid one. I have an old manuscript in PDF format, and I have converted some of it to LibreOffice writer format, but the style isn't very good, and there's all kinds of things wrong with it. I've been able to do free version of Perplexity about 4 pages at a time, but that's a 100-page document. I'm thinking of buying the full 100 or full version for a month and trying to get it to go through that. Just if I can find some time to concentrate on iterating through that and getting it to rewrite it, to see what would happen, because I think it can handle a full size document if you have the paid version.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't used any of the paid versions, so I couldn't tell you. But I have run into that problem where you go around in a circle, and it's really a pity that they're not smart enough to know that they've already given you the answer 5 iterations ago.
A true user grouping never pays for anything.
That's right.
If they do, it's never more than $19.99. That's been around for the entirety of my user group experience, for a gazillion years, and I get a big kick out of it. Back in the day, it used to work. I don't do code. The only code I do is HTML 1,000 years ago, when I put a couple of websites together in it, and I can still read it. But I'm having fun with just general AI. And I think everybody should give it a go, because it's just fun to use.
Yeah, and Judy, I've been talking about Python programming, but there are those small language models that are more general, like Llama itself is a small language model, and you can run that on your PC. So you can certainly try it in a general format. It doesn't have to be the Python version.
Well, Bill James does a ton of AI stuff, and he's been doing it for quite a while. I was invited to a holiday party, and our Wednesday workshop went till 12:30, and the party started at 1, and they wanted everybody to talk about something. So I thought, I'll do a Bill James haiku poem. And I started out with just, haiku poem about happy holidays. And I ended up with 9 pieces of it, 3 slides, and everybody just thought it was the greatest thing that came down the pike, and blah, blah, blah. And they said, "How did you do that?" And I said, "Courtesy of Copilot." And I thought, I'm going to use that for my Christmas card now.
I see Thomas has his hand up, and he's put the question in the chat. So he's saying, how would your example handle an additional line somewhere in the second file, anywhere in the file as the only difference? So I think in that situation, it would be fine, because eventually it would go through the two files, and the lines in file 1 would match the lines in file 2 until there was a line in file 1 that didn't match this additional line in the second file. So then the simple program that I had on the PC version, on the Llama version, would print out the first line, the first file, the line in the first file, because that was different from this additional line in the second file. The ChatGPT version would actually show you both lines, so it would work correctly, in my view.
Steve Parker.
I was say, don't forget, if you want to share and take part in our discussion with questions, use the raise hand so that you go to the top of the list. So Steve can unmute now.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I was just wondering about that NPU that's been toted all over the place with the new systems that are coming out. Do you think that has anything to do with the small language models? Like, could be able to load that onto one of those and have it run faster?
I imagine so. I don't really know much about it. This is a neural processing unit, which are being built into some of the new computers. I imagine that's what it's for, but I really don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Michael Stock.
I'll let it take off. Yeah. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For Murray, thanks, Alan. That was a great presentation. For Murray, there's a WPS Office that comes with Patch My PC. You can install, and it has AI built into the word processor. That might help you with some of that stuff. It also lets you edit PDFs too and save them. So
Cool. Could you put that in the chat box for me?
Not just yet. You
it's
usually tell me to close it.
yeah,
Now I can, or he can.
sure.
Thank you. Tom Kelly, it's your turn.
Yeah, back to my original question I put in the chat. I'm just curious, the extra line, if it's going through it, you could tell the difference, but it wouldn't tell me in either case that they're identical except one has an additional line. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, because we're not really trying to find out how many different lines there are, how many lines there are. We just want to know if one's different. The simple one just literally, it printed out the line from file 1 that was different in file 2. The ChatGPT version, when it found a difference, it would print the same line from both files. But it's not telling you that, that line only exists in that one file. It's just saying there's a difference between the two files at this point.
I see. So basically,
If you want to know more about there's an additional line somewhere, you need more code.
Right. But it would draw both cases, it would draw my attention to where the difference begins.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions, questions, questions. We're looking for questions. Murray again.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Okay, yeah, this is about the Chrome book. I have an old Asus that I bought for about $70 US a few years ago. It was on a one-day sale, limited stock. I got to the store. I was the second one in line before they opened, and I got one of them. But right now it's running OS 132.0.6384.52. I'm assuming it, once I can't update it anymore, will be a good candidate for putting Linux on it. I do have the Linux environment on it, but I haven't really had much. I haven't really done much with it. I haven't really used it very much, but one thing it does not have a touch screen. And the other thing about it that I don't really like the keyboard layout. It's got those funny keys beside the shift keys that I keep hitting when I'm touch typing instead of the shift key, which is a pain. But any comments from the presenter on the Chromebooks?
See if Stu does. He's back with us.
I guess he's not there.
He might be having trouble with his sound again.
Mary,
Oh,
Mark-
yeah.
repeat that a version number again.
Okay, it's 132.0.6384.52.
I think you have the latest, one of the later updates.
Oh yeah, I just updated it this morning, but of course it's not a Chromebook Plus, so I can't get some of the features of it. But yeah, it's still updating. But someday, it is a few years old now, and it is going to.
You know how to go in and find the expiration date. It should be good for at least another 7 or 8 years.
Oh, I don't think it's that long, but I've forgotten how to do it. I've done it once before, but I forgot. How do you do it? I'll go and do it then.
So go down to additional details and settings,
Yeah.
and then you'll see update schedule,
Oh, okay.
and click that. Mine says June 2030.
Okay, I'll look at mine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, you got another question or comment? Thank you.
Yeah, I have an older Chromebook updating in 2022. And I'm wondering if I put that Flex program, Flex OS, will it install a newer version of the OS and get better updates at all, or will it just be the last available
Well,
Not sure
Tom,
the question is clear.
that's a good question, but I think if Flex, you should go and see what it says in your settings and go to check for updates and see what it does. I think Flex will update. The only thing that our presenter noted was that it will not run Android apps. But other than that, it should be good to go. But you might just run the check for updates to see if it will update.
Okay. So I'm curious as I recall, right now it does run Android apps. It gets apps from the Play Store. So where would it draw the apps from in the future if it did not an Android app?
I remember that's what he said. I don't know that much about Flex as the operating system, but as a Chromebook, these if you go to the settings menu and go to check for updates and see if it will what the update is. It should also tell you what version you're running.
No, I'm checking right now. I've got them both
Okay,
side by side.
thank you so much.
I'll look into it later. Thank you.
Any more questions? We have AI questions, Linux questions. Richard Bradford's here from where, down under.
I was wondering, 40 years ago, we had these expert systems that were rule-based and they were interactive. How much of them were used to develop these artificial intelligence systems? Because they used to run on a PC, and they because they were rule-based, they gave you accurate answers.
Yeah, the expert systems are kind of a step along the way to artificial intelligence. These large language models. I think the large language models are, again, they're much more all-encompassing than the expert systems were pretty well dedicated to a certain task, whereas LLMs are more general. But it's interesting, Richard, because clearly things are going the other way. They're now starting to downsize some of the large language models to be very specific.
Okay. Diverse workshops today. Thank you much to Al. Thank you much to Stu. Appreciate participating. We're looking forward to more presentations. Tom, you got one more.
We were receiving handout type things on both presentations.
Yes,
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
And I'm going to check with Stu about seeing what he has left on his that maybe at the January one can let him finish out anything important that he wants to share with us. I was hoping to do it now, but we've lost him again. So I wonder if there's a bad connection. So I'll check with him, but he will send his slideshow to Judy so that we can have it. And if anybody did submit questions for him, she'll pass them on to him too.
I figure the ocean has come in on that flat piece of land that he lives on, and they've shorted out all the electricity on that. So it goes like that. I mean, what happens when high tide comes in? It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great 2024. It just seems like yesterday, Judy and I were saying welcome to our first Wednesday workshop for 2024. And here it's the end. It's kind of sad, but we thank everybody who has helped us by presenting this past year. We're already trying to fill in slots for next year. So we still have room. If you would like to do a presentation, all you need to do is share information with us that we might not know about. And for me, that's going to be a lot.
Even if we know about it, you're going to have a different take on it. And we're going to go, oh, gosh, that way so much better than what I've been doing. You know, thank you very much for letting me learn that at a Wednesday workshop. That happens to me all the time. And all of a sudden I'm doing something I've done for years. A presenter has made it shorter for me and easier and too cool for words. Murray, you're on.
Yeah, mine, my Chromebook's good till June 2027.
There you go.
The hardware probably won't last that long.
Anyway, thank you for sharing.
And thank you.
We
for
have
your
some
help.
interesting things for next month. John is going to talk about his survey that you all will be receiving shortly. And we really want everybody to be nice, take the time, pretend you learned how to share in elementary school, and return the answers to us. They're yes or no or multiple choice. It won't take you any time at all, but it will guide Linux workshops for 2025.
It's synonymous, so feel free to answer.
Yes, and it's got excellent questions, easy to understand. We have 2 new Linux people today. I'm going to make sure that their names are added to the list. And I got the list for distribution from the last 3 Linux workshops. And so anyway, but it's quite important to see how, you know, we're going to learn about Linux from now on. And even though I don't use it, I love learning about it. It's fun, you know, and I'm just too entrenched in Windows.
For now.
I know.
So anyway, next week is a holiday, so we're not here with a workshop. The next week is the first Wednesday, which is also a holiday, so doubly we're not going to be here. So we look forward to seeing all of you on the second Wednesday of January, and the 3rd and the 4th. We'll have 3 workshops next month, and we're going to have some interesting workshop topics. We're going to have somebody who's going to do a number of them for us. So please suggest people who have done a presentation, so they don't have to do it again, and let Judy know, and we'll add them. And Judy, it's our Oklahoma gal going to be back next month, isn't it?
Oh yeah, this presentation on the 22nd has been booked for since last June, and that's because she stiffed me last year in January. She got us confused with Bill's group, the Oklahoma City group, and she has excellent information for us to be, seniors to remain safe and all good kind of stuff. And one of our other presenters that's in a, what organization is Lisa with?
Consumer Protection Agency, isn't it? She was here. No, that's not Lisa. It's the other one.
Emma?
Nope.
No, honest, it is Lisa. Anyway, we're going to be consulted on something the government is working on. So you won't want to miss that. So we've got a lot of different things planned or in the planning works. And we really would like everybody to participate, not everybody, but if you're comfortable giving a presentation, join us with sharing your knowledge. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was Lisa, but it's her team that wants to have some time with us. And so we're trying to figure out a time to get her team in here to quiz and survey us about. She said they had such a great time when she was here 2 months ago. Thomas.
Yes, it's directed to you, John. I have a lot of old hardware, and sometimes the new operating systems, they don't support it with drivers. I've been given the impression that Linux supports a lot of older hardware. I understand, are the drivers just there? If they're, if I have an old hardware and I install Linux and it's there, obviously that's fine. If it's not there, what's the process for getting drivers for Linux that aren't built into the kernel, I guess it's called, or whatever?
Cal, do you want to respond to that one?
Well, they're all there generally. You have to go specific to the equipment to see to find that they have a driver to add. But the Linux kernel continuously adds new ones, and very seldom does it take any away, and they have generic drivers. So give yourself a plus 80% out of the work.
So he has to find out which, for want of a better word, OS Linux has on his computer and go to that place and look for the drivers or download new versions and things like that.
Yeah, the other choice is there are certain distributions which target older equipment. So you can kind of Google search, and they kind of stop in time. So that's the next best alternative.
In general, let's say I do find a driver in a certain distribution. Am I able to extract that driver from that distribution and use it somewhere else?
Not easily.
Gee, even
It needs to be written for Linux.
Oh, but I meant, like, example, let's say I have Mint as an example, and it has a driver I want, but I want to use it in a different distribution of Linux. Is the driver just generic to that distribution, or just to Linux in general?
They're by package types: Debian, RPM, Arch. So that's the first big subdivision. So if you have a Debian, since Mint is Debian, if you have another Debian distribution, you can use it. But if it's RPM, Red Hat, not so much.
Yeah, 'cause
Our suggestion would be to, install Linux on a thumb drive, and we've got workshops that we've done that or showed you how to do that, and pop it into the computer. And if it runs off the thumb drive, it's got the drivers necessary to run. My experience is it's always been the newest stuff that's the problem. We, at our last month's, would have been November's, our club's Linux SIG, we had a member with a Linux laptop, relatively new, had bought a brand new Wi-Fi dongle. It would not work because it was so new, that driver was not in. And you would have to always somehow install it to make it work. But I told him, I said, don't go out and buy the newest one. And he came back this month with another one, and it worked perfectly. So usually it's the newest, way newest, that hasn't been tested out and included, like Cal said, added. But usually old stuff, the kernel just gets bigger and bigger, and keeps things, things are there. So I would do a live test, and then you got it.
How do they get into the kernel?
Yeah, the other
How big is the kernel?
How do they get into the kernel? Does the vendors provide them, the manufacturer?
We have a kernel developer.
Oh,
the kernel is built in, and there's a certain way they do it. They add it on.
you're asking, as example, some I've seen some hardware. You go to say HP example, and you look in there, and of course it senses what operating system you have and tells you what drivers are available. But you can change that sometimes to some other operating system. The thing is, if HP never supports a certain device in Linux, it just won't be there. How does it get into the kernel if the manufacturer doesn't provide the driver? At some point,
the kernel team puts the kernel. It's built into it. A machine, a company has to write a kernel, and then they can put it to where it can add it on. So either the kernel Linux team does it, which they do every 100 days, they add more, or the company, the manufacturer, has to write one specifically for Linux, and they add the code that loads it in. So it's either built in, or the manufacturer has to provide it. The biggest thing you'll find is if you have a real old machine and it's 32-bit, you have to have a 32-bit operating system. Most of them now are 64 only. So if you got a real old machine, look for a 32-bit OS, and that could solve that. Other than that, there are many things that won't run on Linux because the manufacturer has not provided it, and the Linux team has not figured it out.
Cal?
It's closed source, and they can't get it.
Okay, Cal, is your Linux SIG open to anybody, or is it members only?
It's on site.
It's on site. Thank you. Thomas, you're going to need to check with the East Central Ecotuck John's Club. They have a Linux SIG that I'm sure you are welcome to attend. And Brookdale in New Jersey has a Linux SIG that is open to anybody. John, who else is open to anybody? Because Thomas is a UCHUG member. And they don't do Linux particularly, but off the top of your head, do you have other Linux SIGs that he could pop in and say, hi, I'm here?
Yeah, there's the one up in Olympia. They do a Linux Raspberry Pi SIG up there.
That's Tacoma.
Right. We have ours. Columbus has one. Chicago has one.
So you can carry,
I know both Victoria and Ottawa have ones that you can join, and there's
Okay.
a lot more.
Thomas, I will send you a list of these and you can look those groups up, and it's groups sharing information with other groups, and you will be your own group soon.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we got
I was just going to tell Thomas, in the years that I've been using it, the only two problems I've had years ago was with a Wi-Fi dongle driver that wasn't popular, but it's what was in the or a Wi-Fi card that was in the computer. It wasn't popular. So I just would use a Wi-Fi dongle and be fine. Or I would go download that driver for the Wi-Fi card, and then when I got a new version of Linux, I just knew where to just install it, and it would be fine. But that was because it was a very, unusual network card that I think HP used years ago, that finally got included in the kernel. The only other thing I've had trouble with over the years would be maybe a printer, because there are so many oodles of models of printers that you can't have all of the necessary drivers because they're all a little bit different. But I went out years ago and I purchased a Linux driver for a company in Germany, and it worked perfect because somebody developed the driver. You got to have somebody do it. And, Linux, most of Linux people are doing it on their own. And so you've got to find somebody who might have the time. But I have to say, for the most part, I install Linux and it runs. It picks up the printer, picks up the network. Cal agrees with me. So it does pick up. Now, it won't pick up necessarily 100% because of things like a unique something, but there's workarounds always.
I learned a workaround, like for example, for printer, or I had a scanner. It was an Epson scanner, and it wasn't supported in new operating systems. But the family of scanners still existed. And I was able, in Windows, I was able to download a different driver for a different scanner in the same family. And then when I'd go and I wanted to install it, I'd say, I put the hardware in, and it would, the USB device, and it would say unknown device. And then give me an option to upgrade the driver, update driver. At that point, I'd update the driver saying I've got the disk.
Yeah.
I used the other hardware that it seemed to work. That works with Linux as well, that type of approach.
Oh yeah, Mike Kelly, not Mike Kelly, that was Mike in Florida.
Mike Ungerman?
Mike Ungerman has just switched, and I helped him with the recommendation of this German company that does it. And he had a second printer, but they didn't have a driver, but they said, try the driver for this one, and he did, and it worked. Because, like you said, same family. So yeah, we do that a lot.
Okay, I have a question.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, but it's about Windows. And I get asked often, how do I update my Windows drivers? Does anybody have something that they recommend when asked that question? Patch My PC does third-party apps, but I don't know of anything that...
But the alternate, when you go back into your updates, and there's additional updates that you can select from.
I would never do that. Absolutely not. The only update drivers I use is the Microsoft Store.
Got it.
No. This comes from Windows Update.
Well, Windows Update. I mean, Windows Update.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one I'm saying. You go to that one, and then there's a second choice for other ones. that said, if you don't have a problem, don't worry about it. They usually take care of all the driver updates that you need.
So that's the answer. When you get your updates, they are included in your update.
And if not, it would be under that additional. I'd have to go look real quick, but I hate messing with the computer when I'm running Zoom.
Oh.
But when you go to your Windows updates, there's one of those things drop about 3 lines down that it says, like additional, optional updates. And those will have drivers, but normally it says, if you're not having any problem, don't worry about it.
I don't mine.
I agree with John. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate the questions. Thank you for letting me ask that Windows question. And John, walk us off. John, walk us off.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. We had a great year. We'll be back again in 2025. I can just say this, that Wednesday workshop's going to be alive in 25. I'm hoping Linux will. Have a good day, and everybody enjoy the rest of the holiday seasons and all the different festivities that you'll be taking place in. Hopefully you'll be safe with weather conditions and all, and we will talk with you later.